Hey, this is Mat Boggs, and I'm wishing you a happy Valentine's Day. And in this season of love, it's easy to see other people who have relationships and compare that to your own situation, or compare the relationship you do have to other relationships. And one thing that I know for sure is that as you want to expand the love in your life or deepen the relationship you currently have, there's a couple of proven ways to do that. And today I want to share with you a story that deeply impacted me. And the story centers on a theme that when you take this to heart, it can deepen not only your experience of love in your life, but the experience of love in the relationship that you have. And that theme is kindness. It's often overlooked, it's often underestimated, the power of kindness. And yet, kindness can literally create a moment in time in a relationship where someone will remember that forever. And that's exactly what happened for this gentleman. His name is Charles Swindle. He's a reverend, and many years ago he drove taxi. And he writes about a particular experience that he had. And I invite you to hear this story and bring it into your own heart and think about how this story could relate to you during this season of love. Here it goes. 20 years ago, I drove cab for a living. I arrived at 2:30 in the morning. The building was dark, except for a single light on the ground floor. Under these circumstances, a cab driver would just honk once or twice, wait a minute, and then drive away. But I'd seen too many impoverished people who depended on taxis as their only means of transportation. So I wouldn't drive away unless the situation smelled of danger. I always went to the door, so I walked to the door and knocked. "Just a moment," answered a frail, elderly voice. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 80s stood before me. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. "Would you carry this bag out to the car for me?" she asked. So I took the suitcase out and returned to assist the woman. She took my arm and walked slowly toward the curb. She kept thanking me for my kindness. It's nothing," I told her. "I just treat all my passengers the way I would want my mother treated." When we got to the cab, she gave me an address and she said, "Oh, by the way, could you drive through downtown?" "It's not the shortest way," I told her. "I don't mind," she said. "I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to hospice." I looked in my rearview mirror and her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she said, almost to herself. "The doctor said I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" I asked her. For the next 2 hours, we drove all around the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she asked me to slow down in front of a particular building or corner, and she would sit, staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of light was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "Okay, I'm ready. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building. 2 orderlies came out to the cab. As soon as we pulled up, they were solicitous and intent, watching her every move. They were expecting her. I opened the trunk and took out the small suitcase and carried it to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. "No, you don't owe me anything," I said. "Oh, you have to make a living," she answered. "Well, there are other passengers," I responded. Almost without thinking, I bent over and gave her a hug. She held on to me tightly. "You gave an old woman a little bit of joy. Thank you," she said. I squeezed her hand and walked into the dim morning light. Behind me, a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought for the rest of the day. I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten into that cab with an angry driver that morning? Or one who was impatient? What if I had refused to take the ride? Or had honked once and drove away? On a quick review, I don't think I have done anything more important in my life. I hope that story touched you the way it touches me. And what I love about that story of kindness is that it embodies a quality of kindness that can be so powerful for people, and that is patience. This taxi driver had patience for her, an understanding for what she wanted that day, and he was willing to give that gift of patience to her, to drive her around to see these sights. And so in relationships, it's so easy to have grudges and hold resentments and to be impatient with each other. Impatient over breakfast, impatient when someone's a little bit late and we're trying to get in the car and go, impatience in responding to a text message. So I challenge you this week to turn up the patience, because that is an expression of kindness for the relationships that you love, and watch your own life blossom as a result.